Scattered across deserts, temple ruins, frozen mountains, and forgotten forests, there are trees that should not exist. Some are older than the pyramids. Some have been dead for 1,000 years and still refuse to fall. Some grow in shapes no botanist can fully explain, bleed red sap, or hold entire temples in their grip. These are not ordinary trees. They are survivors, witnesses, and puzzles rooted in the earth. From a spruce that hangs in the air with no soil beneath it, to a single organism in India large enough to be mistaken for a forest, we are counting down the 15 most incredible, ancient, and mysterious trees on Earth, and the final one has been alive for nearly 5,000 years, in a location so secret that only a handful of people know where it stands. Before we begin, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from right now. We want to see how many countries this video reaches. Number 15. Tree of Life, Kalaloch, Washington, USA. On a windswept stretch of the Washington coastline stands a tree that appears to break the most basic rule of survival. It grows without soil. Known as the Tree of Life, or the runaway tree, this Sitka spruce clings to the edge of a bluff where a small stream has slowly carved out the earth beneath it. Over decades, the water hollowed a cave directly under the trunk, washing away the ground that should have supported it. What remains is astonishing. The tree now spans a gap, roughly 10 feet wide, its exposed roots stretched like fingers across an empty void, gripping the soil on either side. Beneath the trunk, there is nothing but air and shadow. By every expectation, a tree this size, exposed to relentless Pacific storms and salt-laden wind, should have collapsed years ago. Instead, it continues to grow green and full at the top, as though nothing is wrong at all. Botanists believe the surviving roots have found just enough purchase and nutrients on the cave walls to sustain the entire canopy. No one can say precisely how long it has endured this way, though it has drawn visitors for generations. Each winter storm threatens to be its last, and yet every spring it returns to leaf. Would you trust a bridge held up by nothing but stubborn roots and time? For now, the Tree of Life remains suspended between land and collapse, a living paradox that has quietly refused to die. Number 14. Major Oak, Sherwood Forest, England. Deep in Sherwood Forest stands an English oak so vast and so old that legend insists it once sheltered Robin Hood and his outlaws. The major oak is estimated to be between 800 and 1,000 years old, making it a living relic from a time before England had a printed word. Its trunk measures roughly 10 meters around, and its enormous branches spread nearly 28 meters across, wider than the wingspan of many aircraft. The tree weighs an estimated 23 tons, and its limbs have grown so heavy and so long that they can no longer support their own weight. Since the Victorian era, an elaborate system of scaffolding poles and cables has held the great branches aloft, quietly propping up a giant that would otherwise tear itself apart. Historians believe the tree may actually be several saplings that fused together centuries ago, which could explain its unusually broad and hollow trunk. Inside that hollow, folklore claims medieval fugitives once hid from the law. Whether or not Robin Hood ever stood within it, the oak has become a national symbol, drawing hundreds of thousands of visitors each year to a single tree in a quiet forest. It still produces acorns, and its descendants have been planted around the world. How many human lifetimes must pass beneath one set of branches before a tree becomes a monument? The major oak has watched over 8 centuries of English history, outliving kings, wars, and empires, and it stands there still, held together by iron and reverence. Number 13. Rainbow Eucalyptus, Maui, Hawaii. Most trees wear a single shade of brown, but the rainbow eucalyptus paints its own trunk in colors that look almost impossible in nature. Native to the tropical forests of the Philippines, Indonesia, and Papua New Guinea, and famously grown on the island of Maui, Eucalyptus diglupta is the only eucalyptus species that naturally grows in rainforest and the only one found in the northern hemisphere. Its magic lies in its bark. Throughout the year, the outer bark peels away in thin strips, revealing a bright, almost neon green layer underneath. As that fresh bark ages and is exposed to air, it slowly darkens through a sequence of blue, purple, orange, and deep maroon. Because different patches shed at different times, a single trunk can display all of these colors at once, streaked together like wet paint. The effect is so vivid that first-time visitors often assume the trees have been artificially dyed. They have not. This is simply the natural chemistry of pigments reacting with sunlight and time. In its native habitat, the rainbow eucalyptus grows at a staggering pace and can reach heights of over 70 meters, roughly the height of a 20-story building. It is widely planted for pulpwood used to make white paper, an oddly ordinary fate for one of the most beautiful trunks on the planet. Standing in a grove of them feels less like walking through a forest and more like walking through a gallery. Nature rarely shows off this openly, and yet here it does, painting living sculptures that change color with every passing season. Number 12. Great Wisteria, Ashikaga, Japan. Every spring in Japan, a single wisteria performs one of the most breathtaking displays in the botanical world. Housed at Ashikaga Flower Park, this enormous wisteria is believed to be around 160 years old, planted in the mid-19th century. Though often called a tree, it is technically a climbing vine, and that distinction is the key to its impossibility. Its branches have grown so long and so heavy with blossoms that they could never support themselves. Instead, the entire plant is trained across a vast steel framework, transforming it into a living ceiling. That canopy now covers roughly 1,990 square meters, an area close to half an acre, all flowing from a single root system. When it blooms, hundreds of thousands of pale purple and pink flower clusters hang downward like a violet waterfall frozen in mid-fall. Visitors walk beneath the trellis in dim, colored light, surrounded on all sides by cascading petals. The park illuminates the wisteria at night, and the glowing canopy is often described as something out of a dream rather than the natural world. Caring for a plant this size is a delicate act of engineering. Each branch must be supported, pruned, and guided so that the immense weight does not collapse the structure or the vine itself. How does a single seed, planted before Japan had railways, become a floating sky of flowers wide enough to shelter a crowd? The Great Wisteria of Ashikaga answers that question every April, blooming for only a few precious weeks before vanishing again into ordinary green. Number 11. Monkey Puzzle, Andes, Chile. Few living things can claim to have watched the dinosaurs, but the monkey puzzle tree comes remarkably close. Native to the volcanic slopes of the Andes in Chile and Argentina, Araucaria araucana belongs to a lineage that stretches back roughly 200 million years to the age of the Jurassic. It is, quite literally, a living fossil, a survivor of forests that vanished across most of the planet long ago. Its appearance is unlike any modern tree, a tall, straight trunk crowned with stiff, symmetrical branches, covered in sharp, scale-like leaves, so tough and spiny that few animals can climb it. The name arose from the observation that even a monkey would be puzzled to scale it. These trees grow slowly and live enormously long lives, often surpassing 1,000 years and reaching heights of 40 meters. To the indigenous Mapuche and Pehuenche peoples, the monkey puzzle is sacred, and its large, protein-rich seeds, called piñones, have been a staple food for countless generations. Today, the species is endangered, threatened by logging, fire, and grazing, which means these ancient survivors now face their greatest danger from the modern world. Standing in a grove of monkey puzzles feels like stepping into deep prehistory, a landscape that has barely changed in tens of millions of years. What secrets does a tree carry when its ancestors shaded creatures we now dig out of stone? The monkey puzzle keeps them locked in its armored branches, a green ghost from a world we will never see. Number 10. Crooked Forest, Grifino, Poland. In a quiet corner of western Poland grows a small forest that has baffled experts for nearly a century. Known as the Crooked Forest, it consists of around 400 pine trees, each one bent sharply at the base into a dramatic 90-degree curve before straightening and rising vertically toward the sky. Every trunk bends in the same direction, generally northward, giving the grove an eerie uniformity, as though the trees were frozen mid-motion by some invisible force. The pines were planted around 1930, when the area was still part of Germany, which means whatever happened to them occurred when they were young saplings. Beyond that, almost nothing is certain. The leading theory suggests that human hands deliberately manipulated the young trees, perhaps to grow naturally curved timber for furniture, boat hulls, or ox yokes. If so, the technique was interrupted by the Second World War, when the local population fled and the trees were left to grow wild, preserving their strange bends forever. Other explanations point to heavy snowfall, gravitational quirks, or damage from farming equipment, but none fully accounts for the consistency and precision of the curves. Surrounding these bent pines is a forest of perfectly straight trees planted at the same time, which only deepens the mystery. Why would 400 trees, and only these 400, all bow in the same direction and then reach for the heavens? Nearly a century later, no one has produced a definitive answer. The Crooked Forest stands as a silent riddle, its explanation likely lost with the people who once tended it. Number 9. Deadvlei Dead Trees, Namib, Namibia. In the heart of the Namib Desert lies a scene so surreal it looks like a painting from another world. Deadvlei, meaning dead marsh, is a blinding white clay pan surrounded by some of the tallest sand dunes on Earth, several rising well over 300 meters. Scattered across this cracked white floor stand the blackened skeletons of camel thorn trees, dead for roughly 600 to 900 years, and yet still standing exactly where they grew. The story of how they died and why they remain is the source of their haunting power. Centuries ago, the Tsauchab River flowed here, allowing the trees to flourish. Then, the climate shifted, drought set in, and encroaching dunes sealed off the water entirely. The trees perished. But here is the mystery that unsettles visitors: they never decomposed. The desert air is so extremely dry that the wood cannot rot, and the relentless sun has scorched the trunks black. What remains are natural mummies, preserved for centuries against a backdrop of orange dunes and deep blue sky. The contrast of colors, white clay, black wood, red sand, is so vivid that many first assume the images are digitally altered. They are not. These trees are simply too dead to fall and too dry to decay, trapped in a kind of botanical limbo. How long can a dead thing stand before it finally returns to dust? In Deadvlei, the answer stretches across 1,000 years and counting, a forest of the departed that refuses to lie down. Number 8. Strangler Trees of Ta Prohm, Angkor, Cambodia. Deep within the jungles of Cambodia stands a 12th century temple that appears to be slowly consumed by the very forest around it. Ta Prohm, part of the vast Angkor complex, was built around 1186 under the Khmer king Jayavarman VII. But it is not the ancient stonework that stops visitors in their tracks. It is the colossal trees growing directly out of the ruins. Towering silk cotton and strangler fig trees have taken root atop the temple walls, their massive pale roots pouring over doorways, splitting stone blocks, and wrapping entire galleries in a wooden embrace. Some roots plunge dozens of feet to the ground, gripping the temple like the fingers of a giant. When French explorers rediscovered Angkor in the 19th century, they chose to leave Ta Prohm largely as they found it, allowing the trees and the temple to remain locked together. The result is one of the most photographed places on Earth, a haunting fusion of human ambition and nature's patient reclamation. These trees are hundreds of years old, having germinated from seeds dropped by birds into cracks in the roofline, then growing downward and outward until stone and root became inseparable. Restorers now face an agonizing dilemma. The trees are destroying the temple, yet removing them could bring the weakened walls crashing down. Which will outlast the other, the empire that carved the stone or the forest that swallowed it? At Taproam, the contest is still being fought, one slow inch of root at a time. Number 7. Avenue of the Baobabs, Madagascar. Along a dusty road in western Madagascar stands a row of trees so strange and so majestic that local legend claims they were planted upside down. These are the giant baobabs. Adansonia grandidieri, and the famous Avenue of the Baobabs is one of the most iconic natural sights in Africa. Rising up to 30 meters tall, these ancient giants have thick, smooth, cylindrical trunks that look almost like columns, topped by a sparse tangle of branches that resemble roots reaching into the sky. Some of the trees along this avenue are estimated to be around 800 years old, meaning they were already towering long before Europeans ever reached the island. The baobab is often called the tree of life, and for good reason. Its enormous trunk can store thousands of liters of water, allowing it to survive the harsh, dry seasons that scorch the surrounding land. In a country where much of the original forest has been cleared for farmland, these baobabs now stand almost alone, isolated survivors of a forest that once surrounded them. Malagasy folklore tells that the gods grew frustrated with the baobab and threw it back down to earth, where it landed with its roots in the air, which is exactly what its silhouette suggests at sunset. Endemic to Madagascar, these trees exist nowhere else on the planet. How many centuries of drought, fire, and change must a tree endure to become a living legend? The baobabs have endured them all, holding water, holding stories, and holding their ground against a rapidly changing world. Number 6. Olive tree of Vouves, Crete, Greece. On the Greek island of Crete grows an olive tree so ancient that it may have been alive when the Minoan civilization still ruled the Aegean. The olive tree of Vouves is widely considered one of the oldest olive trees in the world, with estimates of its age ranging from 2,000 to more than 3,000 years, and some claims reaching even higher. Its trunk is a work of natural sculpture, gnarled and twisted into swirling ridges and hollows, measuring roughly 12.5 meters in perimeter and about 4.5 meters across. Yet the most astonishing fact is not its age or its size. It is that this ancient tree still lives and still bears fruit. Each year it produces olives, and its wood has been used to craft wreaths for Olympic champions, linking modern athletes to a tree that predates recorded European history. Determining its true age is difficult, because the heartwood at its center rotted away long ago, erasing the growth rings scientists would normally count. Instead, researchers have estimated its age by studying the tree's location, its species, and the width of its trunk. Belonging to the species Olea europaea, it has survived earthquakes, invasions, empires, and the slow grinding passage of millennia. A small museum now stands beside it, honoring a living organism that has outlasted nearly everything humans have ever built nearby. What would it mean to eat fruit from a tree older than the alphabet you are reading? On Crete, that is not a thought experiment. It is a harvest that still happens every single year. Number 5. The Great Banyan, Kolkata, India. Near the Indian city of Kolkata grows something that visitors routinely mistake for an entire forest. In truth, it is a single tree. The Great Banyan, a specimen of Ficus bengalensis, has a canopy that spreads across roughly 1.5 hectares, about 3.5 acres, making it one of the widest trees on the planet by area. What makes this possible is the banyan's extraordinary growth strategy. Rather than relying on a single trunk, it sends down aerial roots from its branches. When those roots reach the soil, they thicken and harden into new trunk-like pillars, allowing the tree to expand outward almost indefinitely. Today, the Great Banyan is supported by more than 3,700 of these aerial roots, each one appearing to be its own separate tree while all remain part of the same organism. It is believed to be at least 250 years old and possibly far older. In 1925, its original central trunk had to be removed after being damaged by fungus and lightning, meaning the tree now survives entirely without the core from which it first grew, and yet it has continued to thrive and spread. Walking through its shade feels like wandering a wooden cathedral held up by countless natural columns. How can a tree lose its own heart and grow larger than ever? The Great Banyan does exactly that, quietly dissolving the line between a single tree and a living forest, and standing as one of the most remarkable organisms India has ever grown. Number 4. The President, Sequoia np California. High in California's Sierra Nevada stands a giant sequoia so immense that photographers need dozens of stitched images just to capture it whole. Known as the President, this tree is estimated to be around 3,200 years old and ranks as one of the largest living things on Earth by volume. It contains roughly 45,000 cubic feet of wood and stands about 247 feet tall, with a trunk that barely tapers as it rises. But the number that truly staggers scientists is not its size today. It is that the President is still growing. Researchers who studied the tree found that, despite its ancient age, it continues to add roughly 1 cubic meter of new wood every single year, defying the assumption that giant sequoias slow to a near stop in old age. Its crown holds an estimated 2 billion leaves, and its branches are so thick that individual limbs rival the trunks of ordinary trees. Giant sequoias possess thick, fire-resistant bark, and rather than fearing wildfire, they depend on it, for the heat helps release their seeds. The President has survived an estimated 3,200 winters, countless fires, and droughts that would kill almost anything else. It germinated around the time the pyramids of Egypt were still relatively young. How does a living thing keep expanding after standing for 3 millennia? The President answers simply by refusing to stop, quietly laying down another ring, another meter, another year, as human civilizations rise and fall far below its branches. Number 3. Arbol del Tule, Oaxaca, Mexico. In a small town square in the Mexican state of Oaxaca stands a tree so wide that for years people refused to believe it was a single organism. Known as El Arbol del Tule, this Montezuma cypress possesses the stoutest trunk of any tree on Earth. Its circumference measures roughly 42 meters, about 137 feet around, with a diameter close to 14 meters. To put that in perspective, it would take dozens of people joining hands to encircle it completely. The trunk is so massive and so covered in swirling bulges and folds that locals point out shapes within it, elephants, lions, and faces, earning it the nickname the Tree of Life. For a long time, skeptics argued that such girth was impossible for one tree and insisted it must be several cypresses fused together. But DNA testing settled the debate. The Tree of Tule is genetically one single organism. Its age is estimated at somewhere between 1,400 and 1,600 years, though some local traditions push that figure far higher. The tree owes its survival partly to careful tending and to an irrigation system that keeps its roots supplied with water in an increasingly dry region. Standing in its shade, dwarfed by a wall of living wood wider than a small house, visitors often fall silent. How can a single seed produce something this vast, this sculptural, this improbable? The Tree of Tule has stood in the same spot since before the Aztec Empire existed, growing wider with each passing century, a monument that no human hand designed. Number 2. Dragon Blood Tree, Socotra, Yemen. On a remote island in the Arabian Sea grows a tree so alien in appearance that visitors often say Socotra feels like a different planet. The dragon blood tree, Dracaena cinnabari, is shaped unlike almost anything else in the plant kingdom. Its trunk rises to a dense, upturned crown of branches that spread into a near-perfect umbrella or mushroom silhouette. This unusual form is not decorative. The tightly packed canopy captures moisture from the mist and clouds that drift across the island's mountains, funneling precious water down to the roots in one of the driest environments on Earth. But the tree's most famous feature is hidden inside. When its bark is cut, it seeps a deep red resin that looks unnervingly like blood, and it is from this that the tree takes its dramatic name. For centuries, this dragon's blood resin has been prized as a dye, a medicine, and a varnish, traded across the ancient world. The dragon blood tree is endemic to Socotra, found nowhere else on the planet, a relic of ancient flora that survived in isolation while the rest of the world changed around it. Individual trees can live for centuries, but the species now faces a grave threat, as a drying climate and grazing goats prevent young trees from taking root. What happens to a creature that has no relatives and no second home when its one island begins to change? The dragon blood tree stands on that edge now, an ancient, bleeding umbrella of a tree, holding on in a place that feels closer to a dream than to Earth. Number 1. Methuselah, White Mountains, California. High in the harsh, windswept White Mountains of California grows the most extraordinary tree in this entire countdown, and possibly the most ancient non-clonal living thing on Earth. Its name is Methuselah, a Great Basin bristlecone pine, and it is estimated to be more than 4,800 years old. It germinated around 2,800 years before the Common Era, which means this tree was already alive before the Great Pyramid of Giza was built, before the first written histories, before nearly every civilization we study. When Methuselah was a seedling, the wheel was a new invention. To survive so unfathomably long, this tree has embraced hardship rather than comfort. Bristlecone pines grow in some of the most brutal conditions imaginable, on dry, rocky, nutrient-poor slopes over 10,000 feet high, battered by wind and cold. Paradoxically, this adversity is the secret to their longevity. The harsh environment produces dense, resin-rich wood that resists rot, insects, and disease, and the trees grow so slowly that some barely add an inch of girth in a century. Much of a bristlecone's trunk may appear dead, with only a thin strip of living bark keeping the whole tree alive. The exact location of Methuselah is kept secret by the authorities, deliberately hidden to protect it from vandalism and souvenir hunters, so that, among the thousands of ancient pines in the grove, no visitor knows which one it is. Standing somewhere in that forest is a living organism that has quietly endured nearly 5,000 years of Earth's history. What could a tree remember, if only it could speak? Methuselah keeps its secrets and keeps on living. From a spruce suspended over empty air to a pine that has outlived civilizations, these 15 trees remind us that the natural world is far stranger and far older than we often imagine. They have survived droughts, wars, empires, and the slow erosion of time itself, standing silent while everything around them changed. Some bleed red, some glow with color, some hold temples in their roots, and one has been alive for nearly 5,000 years in a place no one is allowed to know. They are not just trees. They are the oldest, most patient witnesses on this planet, and they are still standing. Which of these ancient survivors amazed you the most? Let us know down in the comments, and if this journey gave you a new respect for the living giants of our world, consider subscribing for more of Earth's greatest mysteries.